Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay, all right. So, who here is a science kid? Raise your hands. Yes, okay, I see some. Okay, what is a science kid, right? Is a science kid someone who's good at biology, physics, or chemistry? Is it someone who gets good grades or wins competitions? Is a science kid someone who prefers to stay inside and read a book or go outside and play? Well, if you are a science kid, you know that you're much more than that. A science kid is a thinker, right? A science kid is someone who, when presented with a problem, can't resist solving it. A science kid is someone who is not content to how things are, but rather would always try to find a better way. And guess what? A science kid is also a regular kid, right? So a science kid is a kid who needs to play, who needs friends, who needs family, and has other interests. I was a science kid. School was relatively easy for me, and I never really had to study. I love science because it dealt with cold, hard facts, and there was always a right answer. Or so I thought. And then I got into a science high school, just like you. And then suddenly, people were as smart, if not smarter, than me, right? And suddenly, I had to put in the hard work and actually study. And I couldn't rely on my natural ability anymore. And suddenly, I was no longer number one. And all of these things made me question if I deserved to be there. It made me question my potential, my intelligence, and it made me question if I was even a science kid to begin with, right? I still wanted to be a scientist, but of a different kind. I love solving problems, and algebra was my favorite subject. You tell me to look for X, and I'll find it, right? So X is defined as the unknown variable, right? To solve for X, you need to know the mathematical laws and apply them to the equation. In real life, there are many unknown variables. There are many X's. But what laws do we apply to problems such as love, loss, relationships, and to human emotions such as sadness and anger? That was the ultimate algebra problem that I wanted to solve. And none of my classes had the answer. And instead, they told me to stick to the periodic table. They told me to stick to atoms, to organisms. These are important things too, and they need to be understood. However, the irresistible problem for me was human emotion. I really wanted to know why people behave the way they do, why they feel the way they do, and why they love the people they love, right? And I realized that I wanted to become a scientist, but of a different kind. And it was only much later on that I found out that there was a name to the kind of scientist that I wanted to be. I wanted to become a psychologist. And then, without intending to, I became the X that teachers needed to solve. Why does Anna keep proposing behavioral topics for research classes? Right? Like, why doesn't she seem interested in traditional sciences? Why does she keep asking all these weird questions? And then, later on, why isn't Anna happy anymore? And why is she getting sick all the time? Academically, I was doing okay. I was fine. My grades, okay, not great, right? But they were passing. However, I knew inside something was going on. I stopped enjoying my classmates. I stopped caring about my classes and about school. And then it wasn't even just a feeling anymore. Something definitely was wrong. I became physically sick. I developed migraine. I had vertigo. I had ulcer. I fainted quite a lot. And I was actually, really prone to the cold and to the flu. It was then that I began to really understand and appreciate the connection between well-being and being literally well. So what is well-being then, right? We use the word well-being all the time. We see it everywhere. But do we even know what it looks like? For some people, they think that being well means to be happy all the time. For others, they think it's when you have no more problems to solve. But by virtue of being human, it is actually biologically impossible to be happy 24/7. It's also physically impossible to have no problems whatsoever. And as long as we are alive and breathing, challenges lay before us. And we, as science kids, are always trained to solve for X. However, perhaps X is not the problem that we need to solve. Perhaps it is the assumptions that we have about the equation that is the problem. For example, we assume that being sad is bad. We assume that every task should be easy. And when we don't question these assumptions, then we can't find the real answers. So then what is the equation to well-being? And moreover, what is the well-being equation for science kids? Do good grades lead to well-being? Does success, perfection lead to well-being? Do only certain interests and professions lead to success and well-being? The equation handed to me assumed that I needed to be a traditional scientist to be successful and to be happy. And the reason I got so sick was that my body was literally actively rejecting that equation. And when an equation does not hold, a true scientist finds a new one. I was miserable because I initially thought that I had to choose between science and psychology. And then I realized my true X. The answer to my equation was that I did not have to choose, right? Isn't science all about identifying a problem and finding a way to solve it? Science can be found everywhere and can be applied anywhere, including to human emotions and relationships. And only upon realizing this was I able to regain my science kid identity. And realizing that psychology can become a way for me to still be a scientist and also a way to help other science kids find their own equation to well-being. And then I was able to reconcile all my other interests. I was still a scientist, but I was a scientist that wants to solve human problems. And as long as I knew what I wanted, who I was, and who I wanted to become, then fighting for it doesn't seem so hard anymore. And finding my purpose, my equation, gave me the strength to recover and gave me the strength to face the challenges before me. So now, standing before you today, as a psychologist, I want to pay it forward by helping you find your own equation to well-being. First, get as much support as you can. Ask for help. As embarrassing as it is, admitting that you need help is what's going to get you help. And for people, as science kids, right, you're told that you're smart and therefore you should be independent, then asking for help might seem like an impossible task. But guess what? Professional scientists actually work in teams. So solving a problem does not mean solving the problem alone. And it was only when I approached my teachers and told them my struggles about my science kid identity, and I was so happy that they were the ones who pointed me to the right direction. Okay? Second, don't underestimate your parents. Don't assume that they will never understand. Okay? As a scientist, we should always check our assumptions, right? We create a hypothesis, then we need to collect data to test its veracity. And true scientists always seek the truth, whether it confirms their hypothesis or not. For years, I was so worried that my scientist parents would not accept my career decision. And I was pleasantly surprised that they told me that I could be whoever I want to be. It would actually take them years to truly understand and appreciate psychology as a science, but they made the effort and it made all the difference. Third, be willing to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. Perfection should never be the goal. Okay? So the breakthroughs in science come from mistakes, right? And failed experimentation still yields valuable information. Think Alexander Fleming, right? And how he forgot to wash his petri dishes that led to the discovery of penicillin. In psychology, Ivan Pavlov simply wanted to collect saliva from dogs, which led to the behavioral theory of classical conditioning. Right? For teachers, make room for mistakes for your students. Right? Know that mistakes are necessary for learning. Right? What you call a mistake, a scientist will call trial 1, trial 2, trial 3. Right? So don't mistake your students' curiosity for impertinence. Don't mistake your students' out-of-the-box thinking for being smart aleck or hard-headed. Okay? For schools, instead of zero-tolerance policies, I encourage fault-tolerant policies. I want you to encourage science kids, okay, towards all areas of science. And I want you to encourage things like curiosity, wonder, creativity, and imagination. A good scientist requires all of these things. How else can they innovate, right? And come up with novel methods and novel experiments? How else can they come up with complex theories about the universe? Right? So we should encourage skill sets and interests that foster this imagination. Let's also encourage a broader, more process-oriented view of science, because science is not merely content, but more importantly, science is a systematic method of inquiry. Being a science kid is so much more than about being smart or getting good grades. And the well-being of a science kid does not rely on purely their academic potential. True scientific thinking, right, can actually foster well-being. And good well-being can then in turn foster true scientific thinking. And it is when we question and change the traditional equation for scientist success can we then find the good answers. Thank you.